Oh, I'm gonna
There we go.
hit my got it. Okay, there we go.
Well, I want to make sure I didn't forget. I've got notes all over the place.
Oh, here's my prayers.
My notes to remind me. Whew.
Okay.
Hi, Donnie.
Hi, how you doing?
Hey, nice to see you
Good
again.
to see you.
Thank you.
Bright and cheery, smiling.
Come on.
Here comes Colorado.
Yep, there comes Colorado. Mr. Denver, there he
Oh, you
is.
say Colorado or Colorado? I hear it. both.
Colorado.
Me too. I know. And then everyone else says the other. So
Colorado.
Colorado or something like that. How do you say it, Deb Ernie?
I don't care.
How do you
I
say the
just say
name?
Colorado.
Colorado.
Yeah. It's-
Yep.
Maybe it's an east, east. Well, you're from the East Coast, so I don't.
Well, it's an accent thing.
Maybe, yeah, I think.
Although I think the Midwest has the best pronunciation of words than
Yeah. It's
than
been
east
proven.
or the
It
South.
really has. It has been proven that
But
that's true.
they do have a significant accent too.
Oh my gosh.
No, it's very clear English with no accent.
Well, that depends. I mean, if you're from Mississippi or like you from
Oh
Alabama.
no, I'm talking about the Midwest.
Oh,
Michigan,
Midwest. They don't have an
Michigan,
accent.
Ohio.
They don't have an accent.
No,
They
there is none.
do. They do have
Everybody says everybody else has an accent but me.
it.
Right. Oh, Doogie.
Even, I grew up in New York City and I could hear the different boroughs in New York. It's slightly different from Bronx and Brooklyn, similar but not matching kind of thing. Hi, Evelyn.
Hi, how's everything?
Girl, hello.
Marcia, you really heard a difference in the boroughs?
Yeah,
Yes.
we could. Yeah, I grew up in Manhattan. I went to high school in Bronx. And it was a magnet school. I could hear it at that point. When I lived in Massachusetts, I could tell you what town you were from. If you lived in Leominster, you were in Boston, you had a different accent.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, the Boston accent is just terrible.
Yeah, but it's
Maine.
different in Boston than it is west of Boston. It's
And Maine
it's an
too.
accent, but different. Yeah.
We have neighbors next door that are from Maine, and their accent is
I had somebody
hard
come
to
to the
understand.
house from foreign students that were visiting, and
Oh yes.
and the woman from Maine said she forgot her khakis in the car, and I said, "What is a khaki?" Her car keys were in the car.
Oh,
Khaki. And I kept saying, what? Until I finally, and Harold Barishman, he's got that heavy Boston
yeah,
accent.
he does. Yeah, he does. Well, Liz is joining us. Thank you for being here.
No.
Morning.
Got a minute or two before we start. Well, the Hanukkah dinner is partially cooked. Briskets are cooked and cooling in the walk-in cooler. All we have to do is slice it, and then Friday morning at 8 o'clock, the kitchen's going to be busy making latkes.
Oh, it'll smell so good. The only thing when you get them out in the world, aside from home, I don't think they're going to put onion in them because a lot of people don't eat onion, and it tastes so much better with.
Oh my gosh, yes. Trader Joe's has a pretty good latke or potato pancake, but
yeah, not bad.
they're small.
Yeah, oh, you got to have more of them. That's all.
Yes. Well, let's go ahead and begin and with the blessing, and Rabbi, you can take over. Together, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu b'azot divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord God, ruler of the world, who has sanctified us with your commandments and commanded us to engage in the words of Torah. Hey, Rabbi, the floor is yours.
Steve, well, thank you again, Steve, and thank you for all that you've been doing.
Oh,
Steve's
actually,
been taking,
Rabbi, it's not that hard. I mean, all you
I
have to do is
know.
scan the pages and, put it on the PDF, but,
but taking the responsibility for doing it is very important, and you're willing to do it, and you're doing it
yes,
well.
yes,
And that is what is important, not how long it takes. So
right.
we appreciate it, and I want to let you know we appreciate it, and thank you.
You all are welcome.
Yes, we do appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Are all the click-ons, are they the same? Or each time you do it, it's different?
Say again?
The Zoom, when you click on Zoom,
Yes, it's the same link every week.
so we could put that in our
Yes.
file. It says
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
got it. Okay,
Yes. So you don't have to go to the bulletin to find it.
okay.
But I also put it on the web, on our the reminder.
I'll just take that and put that in my
Yeah.
in the
I'll save it in
archive.
my drafts or something like that.
Yeah.
All right.
We're, I believe, on page 93.
Yes, sir.
Eric Olive, what went wrong between Joseph and his brothers? This is Parshat Vayeshev. So I was reading those two new books I got from my new friend in San Diego,
Huh?
Rabbi Michael Leo Samuel, who is very, very prolific. And he's got a book, and he's taken philosophers who did not write commentaries on the Torah, and he collects their comments as it relates to the Torah and creates a commentary on the Torah, if that makes sense. So Philo has a lot of writings, even though he lived 2,000 years ago. Almost everything he wrote is preserved, not by Jews, but by others. And so he takes it and puts it in the order in which it comments on the Torah, even though there was never an official commentary in the Torah made. Same thing with Maimonides. Here's the artist rendering of what Maimonides might have looked like. And he also never wrote a commentary on the Torah, and here we have it.
Okay.
So in terms of chapter 37, we're in chapter 37 of the book of Genesis. If you have your Tanakhs or your Torahs and you want to look at the story in its entirety, you can look on beginning on chapter 37. As you know, or for those who are relatively new and don't know, Harvey Fields gives you at the very beginning, which is page 91, a very short summary. And on page 92 and 93, a longer summary, which he calls our Targum.
Right.
But what's interesting is that Philo and Maimonides lived in the 12th century, Philo lived in the 1st century, so they're more than 1,000 years apart, but they're both Jewish thinkers of importance. How they differ on this thing about what's causing the problem between Joseph and his brothers. Last week we talked about Dinah and the problems with Dinah, and this week we're talking about Joseph and his problems. There's a lot of family problems. So Liz has one son, Canaan, so he doesn't have to worry about favoritism with the other siblings. So Liz can favor Canaan and there's nobody to complain, right? But in this case, there were numerous other brothers, and to make it much more complicated and to apply back to Liz's case, Liz would be one of 4 wives. So the other siblings would not be the same mother necessarily. They would have the same father, but not the same mother. and then that would make it even worse. So it wouldn't be the mother favoring, but the father. And the father would be favoring the kids partially based on which wife he liked better. And it wouldn't be which wife was nicer or which wife had a better relationship. It was basically which wife did he like, from first sight kind of thing. So it was not based on any relationship that you could really alter. But in any case, let me just read you briefly from these two commentaries. In the Philo commentary, it says, the commentary on chapter 37, verse 3, now Israel, who's Jacob, loved Joseph more than any other of his children because he was the son of his old age. And Philo's comment is, his father discerned that his son, which is Joseph, had signs of nobility, and his skills deserved to be developed. Jacob loved Joseph because he was the son of his old age, and like a man fond of virtue, he cherished and kindled the natural good disposition of his son by lavishing diligent care and attention upon him. He did all of this so that Joseph's potential for brilliance might shine forth more brilliantly. Okay, so Bernie, what we're saying here is that Jacob did not favor Joseph for any bad reason, but because he sensed that Joseph had tremendous potential and he wanted him to fill his potential. Contrast that with Maimonides, who says the same verse, but I'll read it to you because he quotes the verse slightly differently. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his children because he was the son of his old age, and he had made him a long robe with sleeves. And Maimonides says, our slaves warned parents, Marcia,
Yes.
right? Against favoring one child over another in one's lifetime. Even though it is something concerning a small matter, you may only favor one son over another about a little thing, right?
Suppose.
Lest it lead to competition and envy, which threatened the family's well-being, as it did with Joseph and his brothers. All right, so that's my opening. Who's right? Philo, who says that Jacob is only trying to nurture Joseph's potential, or Maimonides, who says that this kind of thing, even if he's only favoring him with a little thing, in this case, maybe just gives him a coat, doesn't give the other children the same coat. These things can start wars among the children. Okay, I'll open it up. Raise your hands if you'd like to comment on either Philo or Maimonides. Who do you agree with? Richard Bass.
Got to unmute, Richard.
Okay, I agree with both of them.
Yeah.
I think Joseph, if you look at what he's done, he saved actually Israel, the people, by ending up as a slave in Egypt. Maybe that's what God wanted him to do, and by that the Jews went to Egypt and they didn't starve to death in I think the area is around Hebron. Isn't this where they live? I think, I'm not sure, but also, Maimonides is right that all children should be treated equal. But then some kids need special attention, and so you have to give them a little bit more attention. But Joseph got a lot more attention. I mean, I saw that in my own kids. I remember my son was a little older and he got a little bike. And my daughter, who was 18 months old, was just incensed. She was so angry. She was screaming all over the place. And I said, oh, she doesn't need a bike. She can't use it yet. My wife said, you're nuts. and she went out and bought a little bike for Allison, and she was delighted to ride in that little thing. So I learned very quickly, you got to treat everybody, all your kids equal.
Yeah, well,
Okay, Cy, and then
Oh.
Evelyn.
Well, I'm not a psychologist, of course, but it seemed to me that if any of the children were kinder, if some children were kinder than others toward the parents, the individual parents or the collective parents would be more favorable to that child. I mean, if you spend time with your father or mother, try to, work with them, take care of them, acquiesce to their demand, I would think that they would be more inclined to favor you.
Okay, Evelyn.
well, I think that depending upon the order of birth, the age differences between them, all of these things plus others are a factor in the relationship of the parent to the child. In some cases where there are many children, the parent may possibly prefer the eldest, that is the heir to the estate or whatever it is. Whereas in another instance, he might, as in this case, prefer the child of his old age. So I think those are factors. One cannot exactly duplicate with all of the children. The gift that you give to one may be appropriate for that child, not necessarily something for the others, but there should be some compensation in some way, either showing a little more favoritism toward the other. If he gave to Joseph, then perhaps he should have shown perhaps the other children that he favored them equally, but in a different way, but not make them feel as if they were being neglected in any way, or that Joseph was particularly his favorite. I think every parent probably has a child that they think a little more favorably of because the personality is more compatible with that particular parent. Some children may prefer their mother, so others may prefer the father and have a better relationship. So there are a lot of psychological dynamics in a family, and the more children there are, the more the variations in the relationship. And so it's very difficult to be specific looking back on this particular story and say, this is what he should have done. We weren't there. We don't know. So it's all speculation as far as I'm concerned.
Everything is only speculation. That's all we do here is speculate. But we're having fun speculating, I guess, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Other comments?
Sure.
Who's right, Maimonides or Philo? Is Jacob's treatment of Joseph nurturing a special talent or expressing unacceptable bias and favoritism? Marcia, and then whoever else.
I think a lot of it is, I don't know which one it would probably, which one, what was Maimonides?
He's saying that this is favoritism that's going to destroy the family.
Well, children always are jealous of each other in a family. I can't even if they don't seem to be, mom always loved you better kind of story, and that's what makes the comedy of it when you see it as a comedian, because it's so universal. And I know I had 4 kids, 3 to close in age and then a space, and you let him get away with murder, they would say to me, if we tried to do this or that, we would have
David is which number?
4.
Oh, he's the youngest.
He's the baby. And so, and I said, you know what, I'm prioritizing at this point. Things that I would have gotten upset about when I was younger, and treated you differently. Now I realize it's not that important, and so I wind up letting him do stuff that he, the other one wouldn't have done. So I think it's, the parent as well as the child. In this case, you see the child, I mean, when Joseph had a dream that he told to his brothers, that was a little snotty. I'm sorry, but
Oh, it was very snotty. Yes.
and so it was it was not just the parent and the treatment of the father to the child, but the child's action at that point,
Bernie and then Donna.
Yeah, I'm a little confused here. Where is Benjamin in all of this picture? Because he was certainly more of a child of Jacob's old age than Joseph was.
Right.
Right. Clearly, of the two children that Rachel had, Joseph is is by far the more important one. Benjamin is quiet. He's
Daddy.
he's like a little bit like Joseph, but Joseph's clearly the main son of Rachel.
But it seems to me almost that Benjamin is left out of the story in order to make a point rather than anything else.
And what's that point?
The point is how Joseph behaves.
Mm-hmm. Clearly you are correct. Donna.
I'm not sure exactly how this fits in, but there used to be a woman that wrote a column here. She lived out in Paradise Valley and used to speak to us when we were out at Luke Air Force Base, the Women's Club. And her feeling, I think, kind of fits in here. She said, she had 4 or 5 kids. My favorite child is the child in need. And I had that on my refrigerator, and I used to read that every so often regarding my own 3 children.
I would be very concerned about that. I mean, if you have children and one of them, and let's say 2 of them are very independent and going to Harvard and Yale and Princeton, although after the testimony this week of those university presidents where they said calling for genocide of the Jewish people would not violate any of their very elaborate student honor codes, as long as they didn't implement it. But anyway, if you have independent kids and one kid who needs help all the time, and the parents use this measure of who needs help more to, then I think that would be a recipe for very bad family relations. No, Donna?
Mm-hmm.
I suppose it could work that way. It could work the other way as well. It depends upon what that need is.
Well, but let's say a parent has $1 million, and in theory they're going to divide it equally among let's say 4 children or 5 children, whatever number of children, but then they're going to use the criteria of need, and so the 3 children make graduate college and they start making money and they become quite independent, and one child needs money for this, needs money from that. You could end up giving the entire $1 million to that one child, or almost all of it, and depriving the other 3 or 4 children of anything based on need. I mean, it's a never ending. It would go on and on and on and on. It wouldn't be fair. It would seem.
Not if you just did that, but as I say, you have to evaluate the situation. If the child needed money all the time because they refused to work and they sat in the basement and they watched television all day, as I say, you have to, but it's a good thought that if a child is sick, you may give more attention to that child at that time, or if a child has been hurt or is failing in school, you might give more attention to that child at that time.
But I like those 3 words that you said twice, at that time. So that's, of course, okay. If one child gets a scholarship and the other one doesn't, then you could advance more money to the other child that needs it now. But it seems to me if you got $1 million, you divide it up, and you might give some of it in advance, some of it when you die, but that in the end, it should all be distributed evenly, at some point, right? So in your will, you might say, I'm giving 250,000 to child A. I'm giving 200,000 child B because I gave him $50,000 earlier. But there should be some attempt to keep things equal in the end. And same with attention. I gave a lot of attention to one child because they had rheumatic fever, but now I'm going to spend more time with the other child. It seems to me you want to try to, but I could be wrong. Marcia, Evelyn.
That's basically what she said. My favorite child is a child in need. At that time, it
Right.
kind of
Right. I liked how you repeated those 3 words at that time. Marcia, Evelyn.
So I just was talking to David recently. My oldest son had cancer, and my husband and I wrote our will that we allowed the executor of our will, if necessary, to give more money to the child who might need it for medical care, as if it was medical at the time, at medical care or whatever. So when the will was, divided up of whatever there was, if both of us had died, that they would give the child who needed it more if that was the case, if he needed it for medical care. And David said, yeah, he could understand that we would have done that, So I don't think things are not always black and white and dividing up to equal. Sometimes things aren't equal. And you have to make provisions for that.
Yeah.
Okay, Evelyn.
I'm thinking less in terms of financial support and the interpersonal relationships. I was thinking of an instance of someone that I knew where the younger child had cystic fibrosis, which required constant care and attention. And the older children, there were 2 others, 2 older ones, as they became teenagers, became somewhat resentful of the attention and the money that was needed to be spent on the care of this unfortunate child. And while they were sympathetic, and yet at the same time, there was an underlying resentment that they didn't get the attention, the loving attention that they would have liked to have received as it was given to the impaired child. How can you possibly equalize this relationship? I don't see how it could possibly be done when one child needs the care, extra attention, extra money for its welfare. And so I don't think it can ever be equal. I think there is always a sense that it will never actually be equal. There will always be one who somehow receives either more money, more attention, more love, whatever it is. It's human nature and can't be helped.
But I think there's a very big distinction between doing that because of need and where the parent gets all wrapped up in the one sickly child and lavishes unlimited attention and resources on that child to the detriment of the other kids. So I think if I had a couple siblings and one of them had certain problem that needed to be addressed, I would understand if the parents addressed that problem, and maybe that would be to my financial detriment. But it's another thing when you feel your parents have just lost interest in you and are focusing mostly or entirely on that child. So I think, I agree with you, Evelyn, but I think that it's the emotional background to it that a parent has to keep things in proportion. But yes, of course, they may have to spend more money on one child than another. They may have to spend more time with a child than another, but they should always keep, as much as possible, make the other kids aware that they're doing that for specific reasons, not because they're just all wrapped up in that one child. But I could be wrong. Cy, Bernie, Shirley, Steve, you agree, Steve?
you know, it's a challenging situation. I mean, you've got two parents. You know, for example, like if one child kind of acts like the father when he was a child, you know, a football star, you know, all very athletic, you know, all that. And so the father would more or less enjoy and acknowledge that son's achievements, whereas the other two are kind of lagging behind and not getting that attention that they probably feel that they deserve.
Mhm. Sai,
You know, we all know that this story is going someplace. And the authors, of
Right.
course, had something in mind. So, does it really make any difference who was chosen? The story would have ended up pretty much the same way, regardless of who it was, because that was the essence of what was being written, the end of the story rather than the beginning.
Marcia, thank you, Sai.
So what Sai is saying basically is the Torah was written in such a way as to make us all relate to it, because we all have situations like that. And so to make it a relatable story, you have family dynamics written in there. Very smart, you know, that it was done this way, because we look at it. I mean, if it was just a black and white story, you know, this guy had this and that, and he went to, you know, Egypt, but blah, blah, it would, you say, okay. But when you start putting the family dynamic in there, it just brings us all into the story and being able to look at it as something that could have happened in our families.
Oh, yeah, and it did happen in our families, you know.
It does happen, and it's still thousands of years later, it's still happening, right?
Okay, who is next? Richard, Liz, Donna, Donnie.
Richard.
You ready to-
Richard.
Well, the only
Great, yeah.
very
Richard.
quick comment. This really is the story, yes, has all the parameters that we mentioned, but it really is something that's leading into Joseph and why Joseph ends up in Egypt as a slave, and what Joseph then does because of his extraordinary nature. And how in the end, because we know, because we've all read before in advance, what it portends. So I think it's a story of human nature.
Right.
Human nature.
And Richard, does it come off as,
Every family has this.
does it come off as realistic?
Yeah, it actually does. Yes. I mean, you look at some of the fratricide that occurred, say, in the Ottoman Empire. The new caliph would go and knock off all his brothers and sisters and very close relatives, so he'd have so he'd have complete control. I mean, this is something, and we see this all the time. Even
The
now.
dictator in North Korea did that. He killed his uncle, right?
Yeah, he killed his uncle. That's right. Yeah. So this is not anything that's unusual, even today.
Well, it's not common either. I mean,
No, it's not common, but it's there.
I mean, I don't know if any of us have murdered our siblings in order to take primacy in the family. It would certainly help you get more
Which
white
I had.
meat turkey from the turkey at Thanksgiving if you killed all your relatives. Donna.
Yeah, but you go back, kids know how to play their parents. And parents have to realize that kids do that. And everyone says, don't ever have 3 children. Well, I had 3 children. Happened to be they were all 3 girls. And there would sometimes seem to be always 2 against 1. And many times the problems are created by parents that get involved in that. Leave it alone and let the kids play it out for themselves. And unless it gets really serious somewhere, But parents have to be very wise to what their children do.
I guess so.
Steve
Um,
Steve has got his hand up.
Steve.
Okay, where's God in all this? Does he have alternative motives?
Mhm. That's a good question. So,
The motive is what Richard said. He's got to get Joseph to Egypt. You know?
Yeah.
That's true.
Evelyn.
It's interesting. This beginning of the story of Joseph getting to Egypt, it is God's purpose that they be and reside in Egypt for a time. And it seems to me the Exodus, as we read it, is the highlight of early Jewish history. And all that we are reading currently is what's leading up to the Exodus. This seems to be the predominant theme in Judaism, that we were enslaved and then we were free. And so all of this is a precursor to that particular story as such. And it's an interesting story. It involves human nature and how human behavior affects history, as we know. This is true all throughout history. And so how humans behave is what leads to either wars or peace or whatever it is. And so it is human nature that determines history, shall we say. And I think this story is a precursor to the highlight of Jewish history.
Wow. Interesting. Okay, let's get started then on the article. We're on page 93 at the bottom. And it's Perek Aleph, what went wrong between Joseph and his brothers. So we already kind of know the answer, and that is sibling rivalry. And we already know who to blame, the parents, especially the father, because there were 4 mothers, so each mother is going to support her children. And so we kind of know the answer. Who'd like to read it? Minya, would you be interested in reading there?
Yes, I will. I was just, before we do that, I found that the themes before the 1, 2, 3 ones right above it was an interesting preparation of what was going to come.
Mm-hmm.
We have already seen the results of jealousy and hatred between Cain and Abel and Jacob and Esau. Now, once again, the Torah returns to the theme of hostility between brothers. Clearly, problems of parental favoritism and sibling rivalry occur in every family and in each generation. By returning to these themes, the Torah emphasizes the need to deal directly and honestly with all their troubling aspects. We see something of ourselves and our own families in the story of Joseph and his brothers. Many questions emerge. What went wrong between Joseph and his brothers? Why did they feel such anger toward him? What did he do to make them want to kill him or sell him into slavery? What role did Jacob play in the grim drama?
And people made reference to some of these things already. Donna, Bernie, Marcia, and maybe a few others already mentioned a few of the things that Joseph did to make things worse. So if you have a parent that favors you and your siblings hate you for it, you may not be able to change that dynamic, but you can avoid inflaming it. And Joseph did not do that. When he told those stories about his dreams where he's the center of everything, that must have made his siblings say, this guy really needs to die. This is such a horrible person. We need to torture him slowly. Okay, stop right there. Comments. Joseph. Yes, Donnie.
I actually have a question. A couple of weeks back, we were discussing how Rebecca was the evil one. Bernie, especially, you didn't like Rebecca. And I was wondering, I was wondering your feelings on Jacob. Are they different?
Let's say again, what about Jacob?
How does Bernie feel about Jacob?
Okay, so we're gonna ask Bernie this because I can't answer for Bernie. Bernie, how do you feel about Jacob? Do you hate her as much as Rebecca?
No, I don't think that Jacob had any evil thoughts or bad things in his mind when he treated Joseph the way he did. But I think Rebecca, on the other hand, was evil.
Wow. This is why Bernie has been banned from every Orthodox synagogue in the United States.
And
They
loving
have
it.
his,
I
they
love
have his
it.
picture
I love
up and they
it.
said this man has repeatedly called our matriarch, one of the 7 most important people in Judaism, Rebecca, evil, quote unquote. Do not let him enter under any circumstances.
Works for me.
Do you hear this? Okay. So Jacob is a good guy.
I think he's done things that he shouldn't have done, but he hasn't done them for bad reasons. He hasn't intentionally snubbed his other children.
Mm-hmm. And Rebecca did.
Yeah, she tried. I mean, she stole Esau's birthright, basically.
Wow. See, definitely a vicious, evil woman. But don't
Yeah.
quote me on that. Turn off the tape, quick.
Can't do that, Rabbi. It's in progress.
I'm gonna steal the tape and
Uh,
there'll be an 18-second gap suddenly in the middle of the tape.
Okay.
Okay, other
President
people,
Richardson.
Richard, Liz, Shirley,
Oh.
Shirley, comment
I'm
on
enjoying this.
Joseph and his brothers.
No, no comment?
No,
Okay,
I'm enjoying the conflict.
Uh-oh.
okay. Okay, Minya, back to you.
Joseph's character. You want to do
Yes, we're doing the box.
Elie Wiesel comments on Joseph's character. Jacob refused him nothing. He owned the most beautiful clothes, for he liked to be regarded as graceful and elegant. He craved attention. He knew he was the favorite and often boasted of it. Moreover, he was given to whims and frequently was impertinent, arrogant, vain, insensitive to other people's feelings. He said freely whatever was on his mind. We know the consequences. He was hated, mistreated, and finally sold by his brothers, who in truth were ready to kill him. Joseph loved himself. Maurice Samuel, in conversation with Mark Van Doren, Samuel said, "Do you ever think of Joseph as a loving person?" And Van Doren answered, "No, he's a person who loved to be loved. He assumed that people loved him."
Okay, so these 2 gentlemen do not present Joseph in a particularly friendly way. Does this surprise you, or this is what you expected? All right, so especially Elie Wiesel is very, very aggressive. He's arrogant, vain, insensitive. So
Yeah,
this
he's a
guy was
teenager.
really bad news.
He's
Have
a
you ever
teenager.
known it? I'm sorry,
He's a teenager.
but he's not.
He's
Is he?
17.
17.
Oh, so
He's
he is a
17. He's a
teenager.
teenager.
So it's sort of acceptable. He's like the high school quarterback who's just very arrogant because he says, I'm the best in the whole school,
It's not a good trait, but yeah.
Yeah.
but it's understandable because of his age.
But of course, when I was a teenager, I was never like that.
No.
Of course.
Were anybody here like that when they were 17?
I went,
No.
I went to high school with a bunch of kids who were you know, it was a magnet high school for academics, and everybody there thought they were better than anybody else.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But we all were that way, so I guess it didn't matter then, does it? You have a bunch of high achievers in one big building like that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, the culture was very interesting. If you didn't like somebody, you got rid of them. You just killed them. Rather than we would use a psychological approach, the Freud approach, you know, and reason and find out reasons why. They didn't. They had short fuses. They had their tempers, and if they didn't like something, just kill them off. That's all. And this was the culture at the time.
Well, we're going back to Saudi Arabia. It's still happening.
That's right. It's still the same culture.
Just,
Liz, Liz, can you hear me, Liz? What have you done to try to make sure your son does not develop these character traits of being arrogant, vain, insensitive? I mean, is that an active thing that you plan, or do you just sort of hope that your son turns out more sensitive and caring?
I mean, I think a lot of it is what they see and what they observe and the experiences that they have in their lives. So, I mean, whenever we have a friend or family member who's going through something, I mean, I always talk to him about it. And, you know, what can we do to help? I mean, I think that hopefully should help them become like a sensitive person, but I think some of it is also just sort of innate, just, you know, created, I don't know, maybe on their own. I think Kanan could be a little bit vain. I felt at times, when it comes to other kids, maybe. I've definitely felt that at times. But I figure, you know what? There's so many things that he'll learn in his life, and he might have to get knocked down. I mean, if he really feels that way at times, like he's, you know, better than someone else. I mean, we do a carpool with another boy, and he's a couple years younger. And I remember Kanan didn't like it at first because he had to wake up earlier. And his answer was, why should I have to be inconvenienced for somebody in a lower grade? And I was like, I said, what in the world does his grade have to do with it? This is for convenience, for parents' sake, you know, and why should you care about that? So he may be a little vain, but I'm sure life will knock him down and make him think about that.
Response from anyone? Yes, Marcia. Parenting advice to Liz. Her son is 17, right? Kanan's 17.
Today's his birthday, actually.
Oh,
Turned
17.
17. So he's exactly the same age as Joseph,
Right.
but he doesn't own an amazing Technicolor coat.
He probably
You
has
can
a
get
nice
one
sweater.
today for his birthday. Amazon will deliver it same day service.
I got him a nice ASU jacket. Does that count?
That counts.
That qualifies.
see,
There you
I
go.
think it's how Liz acts to other people, and he sees that, and it's going to sink in with him, and and his dad, you know, and he'll see by their actions how he should behave. A lot of it is family behavior.
So you're saying that Joseph acted the way he did because his parents acted the way they did.
Oh, I'm sure
And
Jacob's
Barry and Liz are nice, sweet, not arrogant people, that will make the son not arrogant?
Well, your father was a king. I guess that makes a difference, you know, too.
So so Liz, if Barry suddenly gets a letter that he's actually the heir to some principality in Africa and he becomes a king, but but I guess it's too late because even if Barry were to develop an attitude now, Kanan is mostly grown up. So this is something that was imbued from when he was little.
Yeah.
Shirley, is that a hand? No.
No.
No,
India does.
Okay.
Minya
Minya, and then Bernie.
I think an important factor that's been left out is, especially when you're 17, you're greatly influenced by your friends, not as much by your parents. And you don't know who they're friends with unless you meet them. And I think that's a very strong influence, especially in high school kids. What their friends tell them or what their friends do to set examples for what the friends think is the best thing is probably not what the parents would have done.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
do the parents need to meet all the friends?
They don't really.
You don't.
No, and I'm speaking from experience.
But yeah, you said contradictory things. On one hand, your kids will be influenced mostly by their peers, but
Right.
then you don't want to meet the peers.
It's not always possible because there are people that are in their classes and they're not going to bring them home to you. So you could say, this is Richard. Sorry, Richard. This is Richard. He's my new friend. I don't think kids do that unless my kids are not kids anymore, but maybe that has changed since my kids were in high school.
Yeah.
Maybe they do bring people home and so that you know who they're hanging out with.
That's funny. I mean, I think that would be a high priority. Evelyn.
I think what Minya says is essentially valid because when I was growing up, my friends came to my house and we schmoozed around with each other. My mother knew who I was associating with. If she was displeased, she let me know. She felt that that one didn't have a good influence on me. When my kids were teenagers, it was rare that I was able to get them to come to my house and socialize in some way or get together. So the late teen years, early 20s, they are strongly influenced by their peers. And if they're lucky, they get into a group that will be beneficial to them. If they are unfortunate enough to choose unwise companions and peers, they may go off in a completely different direction that you don't like or want and have no control over. And
All right, so now Evelyn is introducing the completely opposite theory. So theory one is that this sense of jealousy, where these other kids, the other siblings don't like Joseph or any kid, is because the parents favor one kid over the other. Evelyn is suggesting indirectly, perhaps, that there's another possibility. This has nothing to do with the parents or the siblings. It can be completely external influence from one or more of these children's friends. Or let's say in one case, you have one of the kids has friends that are a certain way, and the others have friends that are a different way. So there's tremendous conflict among the siblings, not because anything the parents did, but because of their friends group.
Are we talking about today's society or the society of Joseph and his brothers?
No,
because
either.
those are different circumstances.
Agreed. Okay.
Bernie had his hand up.
Bernie, did you have a question or comment?
I had a comment, but I think we can all take heart from this story. Look what this snotty-nosed kid did and what he became later on. He went from this kid that made his brothers angry enough to want to kill him to almost the premier the premier of Egypt. So he grew up a lot, and you can expect that, or you can hope that your kids will do the same thing.
Could you argue that many politicians become politicians because they were spoiled and pampered and favored by their parents? And
I
they
didn't say that.
expect and sometimes get this admiration from the crowds, which they expect. They have a certain confidence. A normal person isn't going to become a politician. There's too many obstacles and too many conflicts and too many, lost elections and wasted money and all that. And so you have to have a certain psychology to want to do that.
They could become actors and receive the adulation of a very appreciative audience. And that would be another aspect of it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a politician.
Similar though, isn't it though?
Well, I don't think Joseph campaigned for office or did any fundraising to get where he got. He did it by other means.
Okay.
He did it.
Donna?
He did it within the means of that particular culture to get ahead. He did what he had to, whatever it was, realizing that his interpretation of dreams would be beneficial to achieve an audience of the Pharaoh.
All right, Donna?
No.
No. Richard? No. Okay.
I'll just say one
Steve.
thing. I agree that
All right, Steve and then Richard.
intelligence and his
Go
ability
ahead, Richard, go.
was very beneficial to both he and Israel and the people.
Okay.
Are we
Okay.
getting ahead of ourselves though? Because we're supposed to be talking about Joseph and his brothers, even though that, he ended up in Egypt. We need to talk about what Joseph did and what his brothers did.
Okay. Okay, we'll try to stay on topic. It's hard for us.
I know.
Minya, Donnie, Shirley. Okay, Minya, back to you. Do you want to keep reading?
Sure. Some biblical interpreters claim that Joseph was spoiled by Jacob. He was given whatever he wanted, including a beautiful coat of many colors. Because his father favored him, Joseph believed that he was superior to his brothers, and eventually that he was even more important than his father. Other commentators emphasized Joseph's immaturity. He was just 17, still a very self-centered young boy. He was concerned with how he looked to others. He used special brushes and pencils to color around his eyes. He curled his hair. He put high heels on his shoes so he would appear taller and perhaps older than his age. Furthermore, according to the rabbis, Joseph made up stories about his brothers and then told them to his father. He lied about his brothers in order to make himself look good. For example, he told his father that his brothers were eating meat that was not kosher and that they were insulting to one another. Rashi claims that Joseph took advantage of every opportunity to gossip about his brothers to his father. Though he knew the truth about what they were doing, he deliberately misinterpreted whatever they said or did to his own selfish advantage. He slandered their intentions as well as their accomplishments. For these reasons, Rashi concludes, they mistrusted and hated him. It is clear that most Jewish interpreters evaluate Joseph as an immature, self-centered gossip. Some even blame Jacob for spoiling him. Why, they asked, did Jacob single out Joseph for such special treatment and affection? Rabbi Judah believed that Jacob favored Joseph because they looked alike. Rabbi Nehemiah thought that Jacob loved Joseph because Jacob spent more time teaching Joseph the fundamentals of his tradition than any of his other sons. Could that explain Jacob's preference for Joseph? Might this also explain why the brothers were jealous of him?
All right. Other theories have now come forward. Maybe they looked alike. Maybe they spent more time together studying or just talking. Or Joseph felt that, or Jacob felt that Joseph was the one who would be most faithful in carrying forth family traditions. Joseph was a gossip and didn't even tell the truth about the gossip. All right, the relationship that is portrayed is not a positive one. Should the mother have intervened? Who was the mother in this case?
Rachel.
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 Should she have intervened?
Maybe she was happy he was doing what he was doing to put him in.
Was she alive?
Oh, was she alive?
Yeah.
Because she died very young on the road. So maybe she wasn't alive, right?
In which case he ran free. He had no motherly, maternal guidance at all.
Wow. So there was no mother. And there were 3 other mothers, right? So shouldn't one of the other mothers have taken him under her wings?
But they wouldn't in that culture. Each mother was looking out for her own sons to be the favorite and would have been happy if the others all dropped dead. So it's
Wow.
that was the culture of the time. And so it's unrealistic to say the other mothers would have looked out for Joseph. And maybe Joseph felt so isolated that he behaved this way as sort of self-protection. I mean, as I said, this is all speculation. I mean, we could make a psychological course on Joseph and his behavior as such.
Well, in the TV show Big Love, where there was a Mormon offshoot with and the guy had 3 or 4 wives, they all helped each other with their children.
That was what how the culture was set up. That was not typical of the Oriental or Middle Eastern culture at the time.
Oh man, okay. Cy and Donna, Donnie, anyone else after that, Richard or Liz? Okay.
Rabbi, at this point in time, were the people practicing Judaism?
Were they practicing what?
Judaism, the laws of Judaism.
No.
Well, then why there's mention there concern about one of the sons not eating kosher food?
Oh, because that's from Genesis Rabbah, which was, a rabbinic commentary that was published maybe, wow.
I wondered that too, yeah.
Maybe 1,500 years or more after the biblical story. So they're very concerned to retroactively project Orthodox customs onto these biblical characters. So they're saying Joseph said that they weren't eating kosher, implying that that was a standard at the time, whereas at the time nobody knew about kosher.
Right.
So that's, I think, deliberately put in there by much later people, much later people.
Donna had her hand up.
Who?
Donna?
Okay, Donna.
One thing that's not being addressed in this situation here is that his brothers did what they did to Joseph, which was absolutely horrible and cruel, was because they hated him. And that emotion has followed over till today. And what we all sense out there is the emotion of hate. And we probably pull into ourselves and say, how can they feel that way? How can you feel? I can honestly tell you that I don't think I have ever hated anybody enough to do what some of the people from biblical times to today's times. And I don't know where that plays into the event of what we're talking about, but it's there. And the reason Joseph's brothers did what they did was because they hated him.
Well, you just have to go back to, what was it, October 6th or 7th, or 5th or whatever October was, the
7th.
more is coming out about the Hamas didn't just kill Israelis, they wanted to torture them as much as possible. So there's a lot of hatred in the world. And
But where do
hatred-
people learn to hate? I've always wondered that. Where do
Well,
they?
if you blame somebody for your own misfortune, you don't have to learn it. You just start hating.
Yeah, but how do you do that? Never mind.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's I think an instinct. It's an emotion. It's just there. I don't think you have to learn it. Marcia,
No, first of all, if we're going down a slippery slope here, but I still that song from South Pacific, you have to be taught to
What,
hate. And
Yeah.
that's what's going on in this world is teaching to hate. It's just from crib up,
Especially Hamas. We know that they
Yes.
teach
Yeah,
their
but
children.
it's the Palestinian culture too.
how does one culture behave differently than others? And
It
Yeah.
it goes from generation to generation.
Right.
Once it starts, it just continues along the generational lines. It doesn't have to be rational. It's just there.
well, people can change, cultures can change, societies can change, and they do change. So it's
Speaking about what is going on now, it's not changing right now. So
no,
No,
but
it's
sometimes
getting
it can
worse.
change. Okay, let's read the Binya, you can read the box.
Do not favor one child over another. Resh Lakish, quoting Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, said, "A person should not favor one child over another, for Joseph's brothers hated him because their father made him a coat of many colors." Morgenstern, partiality is injustice. Jacob was at fault for manifesting greater love for Joseph than for his other sons, and for spoiling him as he did. Partiality is always a form of injustice, and injustice is always wrong and causes evil. We have seen this already in Isaac's greater love for Esau and Rebekah's greater love for Jacob.
Julius Morgenstern was the president of Hebrew College. So, but he was there before I was a student, so I never met him. And he wrote a famous book on the book of Genesis, which I have. But basically, he says there what we already knew, that being partial to your children, this is following Maimonides, no surprise. And okay, keep going, Minya. We're now on page 95, toward the top on the left-hand side.
Other interpreters express sympathy for Joseph, blaming his brothers for the hostility between them. Writer Elie Wiesel comments, "They should have felt sorry for their small orphaned brother, whose mother had died tragically. Instead, they pounded on him, harassed him. They should have tried to console him. Instead, they made him feel unwanted, an outsider. Their father favored him above all others, and why not? Jacob loved him best because he was unhappy. But they refused to understand and treated him as an intruder. He spoke to them, but they did not answer," says the Midrash. They turned their backs on him. They ignored him. They denied him. To them, he was a stranger to be driven away.
All right, but Elie Wiesel in that same book said very different things in another paragraph. He said that the kid was spoiled, rotten, and was unbearably arrogant. And then in a third place, he said that he was telling on them, that everything they did, he went to the father and told. or he even exaggerated. I mean, there's two sides or three sides to every story here. Okay, sorry, Minya, keep going.
Right. Wiesel's interpretation does not excuse Joseph's bad behavior, but it does explain Joseph's feelings. He lied to his father about his brothers because he felt rejected by them. But by putting them down, he hoped that his father would love him more. Perhaps, had his brothers been concerned about him, Joseph would have been loyal to them. Instead, he spied on them and spread evil reports about what they were doing. Joseph's brothers hated him for criticizing and ridiculing them. After he told them his dreams of how they would bow down to him and be ruled by him, their hostility hardened into cruelty. They decided to kill him.
Okay. I mean, killing your own brother, that's pretty extreme, but it happens more often than you might imagine in real life. Comments, Richard, Bernie, Evelyn?
No, that paragraph simply reiterates everything that we have spoken about. So it's, I mean, we are interpreting it with our today's knowledge of psychology, whereas many, many generations ago, people perhaps did not have the analytic ability to be able to think through the way we currently do. Occasionally you find philosophers who did, but by and large, I think most people never stopped to think through these problems or were able and capable of analyzing the other person's behavior and then behaving accordingly. They were much more emotional and reacted more emotionally as a result, which is why the brothers felt that, hey, they were justified in killing him because the kid was a real pain in the butt. And
Oh my.
Bernie has his hand up.
Bernie.
Two things. One is that I think that attitude that Evelyn talks about exists today more than we're willing to admit. So many people in this world, in our world, believe that the way to solve a problem is with violence. Second thing is that when I was a kid, we had this joke in my family that when some dispute started, we always said to Dad, it all started when he hit me back.
What?
So in other words, it's the retaliation which really escalates everything. If you let the first punch go unanswered, then everything dies down.
But that's what people expected us, the Hamas, to do, and we were to overlook it. But when Israel retaliated, then the fight was really on. And so what Bernie said was actually valid. If the Israelis had laid back and done nothing, then okay, whatever they did was okay. But the Israelis were not going to let them get away with it. And so the war was on. And the Israelis got blamed for starting a war.
Yeah. Well, by whom? By people who were not objective to
The
begin
whole
with.
world.
It's the world's perspective of what Israel is doing to the Palestinian people.
Right. Who any of them would kill any Israeli in a moment.
Exactly. Or rape them first.
Yeah, so it's yeah. Okay, Minya, keep reading.
Just where his
In the little
dreams,
box.
his dreams fanned their hatred. When he related his dreams, their hatred for him was fanned even more. This is the nature of hatred. Once a new motive for it is found, additional hostility is felt. They decided to kill him. They saw Joseph coming, and one brother said to the other, "Let's shoot him with arrows. For one who spreads lies or evil gossip is like one who shoots arrows." Another brother said, "His tongue is like a poisonous snake. Let's throw him into a pit filled with snakes."
Mhm. So they want to kill him in a way that would be appropriate to what they see as his crimes. Okay. You can finish it up, Minya.
So what went wrong between Joseph and his brothers? Our interpreters offer several considerations. First, Joseph's arrogance, his vanity, his self-centeredness, his lies about his brothers, his foolish declaration of superiority over his family. Second, Joseph, Jacob's favoritism of one son over another. And thirdly, the brothers' isolation of Joseph, their insensitive treatment of a fearful and lonely young boy. Could it be that all these factors combined to spell tragedy for Jacob and his sons?
But the last question, did this really result in tragedy? In the end, Joseph is sold into slavery. He goes down to Egypt. He goes to prison. He gets out of prison. He becomes prime minister. Is the ending really tragedy, or is the ending actually positive in the end, so that bad things can lead to good results? Comments?
Well,
Marcia or Evelyn?
would you say that it was a good result? It was a result as it happened, but not necessarily good, not necessarily bad. It happened. And so eventually, yes, Joseph was put into a position of authority where he could control certain situations. And so when the Hebrews came, Jacob and his representatives, his sons, came to beg for grasslands to feed their animals, Joseph was in a position to do something. But these are all happenstance things. And if you, according to the Torah, God intended this to happen. You could say yes, maybe not. I would be inclined to say these are the things that happened, and perhaps the writers of the Torah thought this was a way to turn the story to their advantage as such.
Okay. All right. Marcia?
Oh, I agree with Evelyn, yeah, but yeah, it's I mean, it's karma, it's Bashir, it's who knows, but I really do think what I was saying earlier, I think it's a compelling story, and maybe life, it was also meant to be, in a way, a life lessons for people at the time, you know, when it was written, you know, about how not to favor one child over another, and look what could happen, and blah blah, you know. So I think it was pointedly and deliberately written in that way, so that we could connect with the story, we could relate to it.
Interesting, because frequently we have groups in our group, there's interpretive groups, there's 3 or 4 different approaches to an issue. Today, there's been no conflict. Nobody here is disagreeing with anyone at all.
I think possibly because we've all of us, I think, maybe here are parents, and most of
How
us
many
are.
people here are
and,
parents? Raise your right hand.
Yeah, Cy's a parent, aren't you, Cy?
I was a parent.
Well, yes,
As
that's
we were, yes.
yes. So I mean, so we relate to Jacob's side of the story. We can see how our children behave. We know how we behaved when we were kids. We weren't, you know, models of behavior when we were teenagers. Sure, you know, we said things to our parents that we shouldn't have, or to our siblings, etc. And but we know better now.
At least we hope we do.
Yeah, I guess.
Sai.
I think it was a great story to introduce God. And God, remember, comes into the picture when the Israelis want to leave Egypt, and they turn to God for helping. God does the seven, the blood on the door and the killing of the firstborn and so forth and so on. And God had not been any kind of a individual, had not been any kind of a substance up to that point. And to me, this is a great way to get to God. It's a great story.
So you like this story? You would,
Yeah,
if we
it's
were
better
to-
than having the kid being good and making it to the top because he was so good. It's better if he was terrible and made it.
So this is a good story for the Torah to include. I mean, Sai, you like all the stories about the patriarchs and the matriarchs, or would you remove the one about sacrificing of Isaac?
That's a whole different thing.
Have a comment.
Okay, Steve.
Well, I mean, if I was one of the brothers and thrown into a pit of snakes, I would definitely consider and definitely want to kill them. Okay, so that's my thoughts.
Does it matter if they're poisonous or non-poisonous snakes?
It doesn't matter. A snake is a
snakes.
snake, and they get away with whatever they want to slither away from.
When I was scuba
Yeah, but
diving years
phobia.
ago, I was scuba diving, so I was taking pictures underwater, and then the photographer said he takes pictures out of the water as well, and if I'd like a lesson, he can take me. He's going to a snake farm, and we would go in with some snakes and take pictures. And later I regretted it, but at the time I very quickly said thank you, but no thank you.
Well, but my comment about Joseph is that if you look at him in Egypt, he had become no longer a gossip, but he became a righteous man. He grew up. He no longer hated his brothers, and he, when he was tempted with sex, he thought that it was wrong and he didn't do it. And he interpreted the dreams for the Pharaoh so that Egypt could survive, and in that way Israel could survive.
Richard, have you ever thought maybe he was gay?
Could be. I don't remember if he married or not. Does it ever mention him marrying?
Yes, I think it is. I think they did. Yeah, he married an Egyptian.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. Yeah, because he lived in Egypt.
So he intermarried.
Well, it wasn't interfaith at that time.
Right, right.
And I don't think they really thought about, did they really think in the Bible about homosexuality? Yeah, I guess they did. They condemned it. Sexuality is condemned.
Yeah.
You know, but he has certain very he's got certain character which is very good. And part of the reason his brothers hated him, he was so different. Part of it could have been that he was gay, and that, what we would call today homophobia. That could easily explain why they went from seeing him as just an exceptional child who was brighter and maybe a little arrogant to somebody who was worthy of dying. It's just a theory.
It's a modern theory.
Other comments?
Yeah,
Who?
I see.
Donna.
Don.
I see that you have a cute pup sitting on your lap there.
Yes.
Am I right that you have two dogs?
That's
Huh?
right. But
Okay.
Skinny was
So
on my
that was
lap
it.
before, and then I switched them because I didn't want Lily to feel that I was favoring Skinny.
How wise you were.
And as you can see, she's not angry at Skinny at all.
She's a cuddle baby.
Feels now that she's being acknowledged. And she's not gonna throw Skinny into a pit with snakes.
Yeah.
She's gonna bite your toes then.
She said,
Does the expression on her face. Gotta love it.
she said, we put up with this boring Torah study just to be near you, so be
Yeah.
appreciative.
Yeah,
Educated
exactly.
dogs,
Yeah.
religious education they're getting.
Yeah.
Yes, well, it's all.
Okay, so let's look at
Positive.
Joseph and his brothers as part of the ongoing story for the establishment of Judaism as a formal religion. It starts earlier and it carries through until they finally enter Canaan. And it's a long narrative. One story leads into the other. It's a history. Whether it's made up or not, we have no way of knowing, but it does form a logical explanation of how the religion was slowly formed and created. And if we attribute it to God, then that explains so many of the things that happened. Otherwise, you just say it is human nature taking its natural course, and this is what happened because what happened before. Take your pick. I don't, it's whatever you choose to believe.
Okay, Marcia.
And I still say, Evelyn, that it's the way it's written makes us want to read it and interpret it. If it was just a timeline story going down, you'd say who cares? But because we can relate to it,
As human beings relating to the human emotions that are involved in the story. It's human behavior, and we can see that we can relate to it. So it's
whether it's 5,000 or 1,000 years ago or whatever number of years ago, nothing changes. It just stays the same. You got jealous kids, you have, snotty kids, you got the whole.
Do you think
it's a
that
big
today
novel.
things have changed with the internet and where kids are friends mostly with kids they've never met on Instagram or whatever, that there's a whole different dynamic than before?
You don't know who they're friends with, I guess, at that point when you look at that. But then again, how come my big sister got a fancier phone than I got, and who got the car first, and which car it was, etc. It's always something. And and there's always going to be reasons for jealousy of as I said, that's the thing. Mom loved you better, or me better, or whatever the story is. There's always that perception going on.
So this is a book about human nature.
Yes.
Yes, essentially.
It's a book about human nature.
I mean, the book of Genesis is so interesting because it's so accessible. As these books go on, it the content becomes much harder to relate to. So I was always a little disappointed as a child when the Torah readings left Genesis. That was by far my favorite part of the book.
This is your favorite book?
For sure. I mean, of the Bible books,
Well, numbers can't be too much great, so.
I mean, Leviticus was the least favorite.
Right.
Clearly.
So
Shirley's
basically,
got a hand.
Shirley?
Yeah, a question. With all the things that Joseph did to hurt other people, is there anything about the fact, did he ever apologize to anybody for what he did? Because he hurt an awful lot of people.
All right, good question. Did he apologize? Did Joseph apologize?
to anybody? His
Well,
brothers
to
or
his
anybody
brothers,
else?
let's say. Yes, Steve.
Didn't he apologize to his brothers when he recognized them, but they didn't recognize him?
Yes, so there was partly an
Was that an
apology.
apology? Was that an
Yeah.
apology?
Yes.
Okay.
That
he
was for
partly
fooling.
apologized.
Somewhat, I would say somewhat of an
And
apology.
he, yeah, so partly. That was a good
Okay.
point. And he didn't escalate it, he had total power over them. He could have thrown them into prison forever, and
Right.
he didn't. Quite the contrary, he tried to be reconciliatory and apologetic. But whether he
Okay.
issued a formal, complete apology, maybe not, but certainly we all have the sense that that scene was his efforts to apologize and reconcile with his brothers.
Okay, so he just turned out to be a good boy.
Well, I don't know.
I don't know.
Maybe not, but he
I
tried
think his personality was still the same.
I think so too.
but he tried to make it up to them a little bit.
Right.
Any final comments?
Well, let's just say he certainly, as Grand Vizier or whatever you want to call him, Prime Minister in Egypt, he was certainly not averse to welcoming his family per se. He did it with a little bit of subterfuge by demanding that Benjamin remain behind as a hostage, which must have disturbed the rest of the brothers considerably. But at the same time, he did welcome them and aid them in providing them forage for the animals and a place for them to live peacefully and settle in. And obviously, initially, they were, if not welcomed, they certainly were accepted at any rate. And so they thrived in Egypt for a long time.
600.
How long? I don't know how long. Was it several hundred years that they?
600.
Couple of 100 years.
Yeah.
Couple of 100 years. Well, obviously, the pharaohs at the time in succession must have been the same dynasty, because obviously what eventually happened is a new dynasty came in and you had a new political situation, and suddenly the Hebrews were no longer quite as welcome as they had been. So that's a couple of weeks off, I guess, in terms of reading the Torah.
Correct.
Don't rush Passover, we haven't gotten through.
No.
Yeah.
Gotta get through Hanukkah first.
Yeah.
Yeah, Friday is Hanukkah,
Yes.
and you're
Yeah,
all
the
invited
first
to
lighting,
services 7 p.m.
Thursday.
Oh, I gotta make sure I have candles. Okay.
We light the candles Thursday night, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
What time is that?
I'm not sure, 5:30?
5:30-ish, I think. Yeah, somewhere around there.
That's tomorrow at the temple.
Yes.
Yeah, well, we're busy. We've got lots of courses going and lots of activities. So, and there's lots of
You want to
people.
announce your studies or your classes, Rabbi?
Oh, I started a course on Monday morning on the 10 Commandments, good crowd. And tomorrow morning is starting a course, Israel on the Edge.
Saw that, yeah.
And that's what I'm going to do today, is prepare for that.
Okay. You
And
ready?
we raised over $10,000 for Israel.
Ah,
Very
Right.
nice.
It's good.
really? Wow. That's impressive.
For a
Yeah.
little congregation like ours, yeah. Did people from outside the congregation donate to our fund?
Yes, people came in who didn't even know, they just drove over, walked in and handed us checks.
That's
Oh.
wonderful.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
Oh, and Monday I was at they had one of the local churches in Sun City, they had a service for Israel and the Jewish people.
No,
They
well,
asked me to speak for 10 minutes.
yeah. If you'll excuse me, I must leave. I have an appointment. So sorry, everyone.
Okay, we're gonna
Good
do the
week.
final blessing and say
Yes, sir.
goodbye to
Happy
everyone.
Hanukkah.
We
Okay.
join together.
Baruch atah Adonai
Adonai,
Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah v'chayei olam notav b'tokenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Blessed is Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who has given us a teaching of truth, implanting within us eternal life. Blessed is Adonai, giver of the Torah. Amen.
Okay.
Man.
All right, everyone, have a good rest of the week. Hope to see everyone Friday night at the temple.
Gotta get
Shirley,
me
you're
my car.
invited. We'll send you a private plane to pick you up.
Okay, good idea. I'll wait for it.
All right, everyone, have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you guys soon. Take care.
Okay, take care. Everybody have a good Hanukkah.
You too.
You too.